All right, let's talk about something huge. Every single year, companies pour billions of dollars into leadership development. We all just sort of assume it works, right? But does it? Can you actually prove scientifically that these programs create better leaders? That's the big question we're going to tackle today.
You know, for the longest time, the whole field of leadership research was, to put it lightly, a bit of a mess. For most of the 20th century, academics were wrestling with this really basic problem that made it almost impossible to figure out what leadership is, let alone if you can teach it.
This quote from Ralph Stokedale way back in 1948 just hits the nail on the head. He's basically saying, hey, nobody can even agree on what we're studying. And if you can't define leadership, how on earth are you supposed to measure it or figure out how to develop it? This wasn't just a small issue. It was a fundamental roadblock to building a real science of leadership.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, especially for anyone studying organizational psychology. We're not just asking if there's a connection between good leadership and good results. No, we want to know if a specific program, a specific workshop, causes a positive change. We're looking for cause and effect. And believe me, that is a much, much higher bar to clear.
A huge reason for all this uncertainty, as the scholar Gary Uckel pointed out, was that so much of the research was just based on surveys. You know, you ask people, did you like the training? Or, is your boss nicer now? And sure, that's interesting info, but it doesn't prove the training caused anything. Maybe the company had a great quarter, or maybe it was just a coincidence. To prove causation, you need much stronger evidence.
So, how did the field finally break through this fog of ambiguity and get a real, data-driven answer? Well, that's where things get really interesting, thanks to the power of something called a meta-analysis.
Okay, so in 2009, a team led by Bruce Avolio published what is truly a landmark study. Their goal was pretty straightforward, but also incredibly ambitious. They decided to hunt down every single experimental study where researchers had actively tried to train or change leadership, and then crunch all the numbers together to see if these interventions actually worked.
And the scale of this thing is what makes it so powerful. We're talking 200 different studies with over 13,000 people. And crucially, they weren't looking at those simple surveys we mentioned. They only included studies where researchers did something, an intervention, a training, and measured the outcome against a control group. This was all about finding that causal link.
So, here it is, the big answer. What they found was that the average person who goes through a leadership development program has a 66% chance of having a better outcome than someone who didn't. Think about that. It's way better than a 50-50 coin flip. This was the moment the field could finally say with real, hard evidence, yes, on average, leadership interventions do work. They cause a positive impact.
But of course, working on average is never the full story, is it? The researchers dug a lot deeper, and what they uncovered is absolutely crucial. The type of leadership theory you're teaching, well, it matters a lot.
First up, we have what they call traditional leadership models. The best way to think about these is as transactional. It's all about a clear exchange. You do your job well, and I, as the leader, reward you. It's about setting expectations, monitoring for mistakes, and giving rewards when things go right. It's very much a what's in it for me kind of approach.
But then, in the 1980s, this whole new way of thinking emerged, which we now often call transformational leadership. And this is a totally different ballgame. It's not just about a transaction. It's about inspiring people with a vision, pushing them to think in new ways, and getting them to care more about the team's goal than their own immediate self-interest.
This chart just lays out the difference so clearly. Look at the left side. Transactional is about managing, rewards, catching errors. It's all about what you get. Now look at the right. Transformational is about leading, inspiring, stimulating, caring for the individual. It's focused on what you can do. It's a fundamental shift in perspective. And here's where the data just screams at you. The meta-analysis found massive differences. The impact of programs based on these newer, transformational theories was more than double the impact of the traditional ones. And what's really fascinating is that an approach called the Pygmalion effect, where leaders are taught to hold high expectations for their team, had the biggest impact of all. The takeaway is undeniable. How you teach leadership is just as important as that you teach it. Okay, so we have established that interventions can work and that certain types work better than others. But this kind of peels back another layer of the onion, raising an even deeper question. When we use the phrase leadership development, what are we actually talking about? Does everyone even mean the same thing?
This is where a really cool study from 2020 by Kjellström and his colleagues comes in. They did something so simple, yet so insightful. They went out and just asked professionals,
What does leadership development mean to you? They wanted to uncover the hidden assumptions people have about this term we throw around all the time.
And what they discovered is that there isn't one answer. There's a whole spectrum. For some people, it's really simple. It's just about my own self-improvement. For others, it's more tactical, learning the skills I need for my job title. But then, it gets more complex. It becomes about personal growth that goes beyond work, then about aligning that growth with the company's goals, then shifting the focus from the individual to developing the entire team's ability, and finally, seeing it as this open-ended, continuous process of human growth.
Now, the really important thing to grasp here is that these aren't just 6 random bullet points. The researchers argue that they actually represent a kind of developmental ladder. Each step shows an increasing ability to think about leadership in more complex and sophisticated ways, moving your focus from just yourself to your role, to the organization, and finally to the entire system.
So what do we do with all this? How do we pull these different threads together? The hard data, the different theories, and this new understanding of what development can mean. What does this tell us about actually building programs that make a real difference?
It really boils down to this. Number 1, we can be confident these programs can work. The evidence is there. 2, the model you use is critical. Leaning into transformational ideas is probably a good bet. 3, you have to be super clear about what you're trying to change. Is it how people feel, how they think, or how they act? And finally, and this might be the most important, you have to be aware of what your organization even means when it says development.
And this last quote from that big Avolio study just says it all. The effects aren't simple, they're complex, and they're multidimensional. This isn't a problem you can solve with a one-size-fits-all workshop. It demands that we get much, much more sophisticated in how we think about, design, and measure this stuff.
So I'm going to leave you with a question to take back to your own world. When you hear the words leadership development in your organization, which of those 6 meanings is really driving the conversation? Is it just about training someone for a role, or is it something deeper? Figuring out that hidden assumption, well, that might be the key to unlocking real development. Thanks for tuning in.